creators use a wide variety of tools to help them improve their efficiency and style, and 3D models and assets can be some of the most useful tools available. But wait, you may be thinking, Webtoon Originals and Canvas series feature some of the most unique worlds, characters, and styles readers have ever seen. Those unique styles can't possibly be created with assets, right? Well, you're about to be amazed because our second workshop of the day features expert tips and tricks for improving your workflow with 3D models. During this workshop, Webtoon Originals creator Captain Juuter, alongside special guest Jean Kim, will help you learn to effectively utilize 3D assets when creating scroll comics. To introduce our guest today, Captain Juuter is the creator of the Webtoon Original series Nomads. One of their readers commented on episode 4, whenever there's a cat involved, you know it's going to be awesome. And that's exactly what this series is. A lot of the comments reference the beautiful art and engaging characters. Captain Juuter's style is so unique. I honestly didn't know that they use 3D models. They're an expert at integrating 3D tools and assets into their series and workflow. Joining Captain Juuter today is a special guest, Jean Kim. An artist associate here at Webtoon, Jean works with our in-house producers. You might recognize their team as WMW. Jean comes from a 3D background and has worked on some of the most read comics on the planet, like DC and Webtoon collaborations like Batman Wayne Family Adventures, Vixen NYC, Red Hood Outlaws, as well as other series like Archie Comics, Big Ethel Energy, and The Wrath in the Dawn, as well as other series in development at Webtoon. She's joining us to share tips alongside Captain Juuter. So get ready for an exclusive walkthrough of Captain Juuter's process for their own series, Nomads, with tips from Jean. Please join me to celebrate our guests as I turn the stage over to them.
Thank you, Kristen, for an awesome introduction. And I'm here today to kind of talk about working with 3D assets in Webtoons. I'm also, full note, very new to this myself. I'm kind of going off of the basics. There's so much more that you can learn. And Jean is also here to help share those like amazing tips and tricks that she has to offer as well. I hope you guys can learn something from this. On to our first topic of the note. Everyone, this is Jean.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our workshop today. So I'm going to be talking about some 3D programs like you use for your Webtoon. And these are some helpful resources like Acon 3D and Clip Studio Libraries Assets and Snaptoon 3D Warehouse. I'll be going over the programs Blender, Snaptoon, and Daz 3D. And I encourage you to use programs that you find helpful for your own workflow, because not everything might be easy, because I have my preferences. And so, using the programs that works best for you is the key. So Blender is a helpful program if you prefer to create your own 3D assets. And if you need to convert a 3D asset into another file format, like an OBJ or to an FBX file. And Snaptoon is currently a beta program, but it's a great tool for lighting background sets really quickly. And you can import SketchUp files directly into the program. The UI is beginner friendly, so it makes it really simple to navigate. And in Daz 3D, you could create 3D models based on your characters. They have default 3D models they could choose from to customize. It offers more customization compared to Clip Studio's default 3D models, but the workflow is not as straightforward, so you would have to take it into another program to add rigs before bringing it into Clip Studio to have it ready for posing. So it's helpful if you have a unique character, but I personally find it easier to use Clip Studio's 3D models.
Right, and then one of like the biggest programs that I use when I download my Acon files is the SketchUp. It's a lot to deal with, but it can handle those large files. Like when I download the big towns that I use for my big scenes. Another one, Clip Studio Paint, has an amazing asset store. As Jean said, they've got tons of like basic models that you can do, and it's really cool because you can customize them. They also have tons of brushes and stuff. You can just go onto their asset store. A lot of them are free as well, or you can also choose to pay with their in-house like clippy points and things, which you can earn for free as well. It's like very easy to use. SketchUp, I also want to mention, is a subscription service, so it does cost like money to pay as opposed to Snaptoon, which is free. And one that I'd like to mention as well is Abler, which is very new to the scene. It's through Acon 3D, and they have a lot kind of similar to Snaptoon, where it's you can set lighting and scenes. It's definitely still in its beta stage, so handling large towns that I use, I haven't been able to fully open in there, but they'll do smaller scenes, like when you have just single rooms and stuff like that. It'll handle it very well. And I also wanted to jump out of here. I can kind of show you guys a little bit of my process as I go. Actually, before I do this, I'd love to show you guys Acon 3D, kind of like this is the home site for it. And it's really cool because when my nomads in my story travel to a place and I'm like, oh, trying to figure out what kind of town that I want. So like in the newest town that I'm drawing currently in my series, they go to a really like shabby place. So I can just type in fun keywords like rundown town in the search bar. And all these keywords, excuse my slow internet, it's running a lot of things at once right now for this workshop, but it kind of gives you tons of different models and scenes depending on how you kind of your story fits. If you want to go more Eastern or more Western, more toony. And I'll kind of just scroll down until I find a town that suits me. And this one actually that I'm circling here is a medieval town, and it looked really cool and like grungy. So that's what I have working with me today. And you can kind of in SketchUp really, it is going to buffer a whole lot, folks, because it's not used to running on my laptop, which unfortunately I have to work on through this workshop. I can't use my big desktop currently. I won't try to move a lot, so I do. But as you can see on the screen, it gives you the whole town. It's really cool because you can click in and kind of move things around if you so be it. So I have this little section here because one scene that I will be drawing has the gang sitting on like a bench. And because the town is like really like run down, it was cool that I could grab objects that were laying around and build a bench out of just like random furniture because it really works in this. And what I like the most is because when I worried about first starting with 3D models was that maybe the 3D kind of look wouldn't go well with my toony style. But in SketchUp, what's really cool is that you can mess with the different profiles and like the styles, so you can kind of turn off all of those textures, and you can also just turn it entirely into lines and color it yourself as well, which is the main thing that I do. Is so I will export, so say if I want an angle scene of just them full stand like sitting on this bench, I can export this file as a PNG and it'll just be lines. And you can also kind of edit the line weight over here, and it can thicken and change its depths. You can kind of go less lines if you wanted, depending on the style that you're going for. And then also you can turn off those lines and go back and just get the flat colors, which is also what I like to do. And then let me switch over my screen so I can show you guys how I'll bring it into Clip. Clip Studio Paint is like my main program that I use. I have the EX version, which allows you to work with CMC files, which gives me a lot because I have to do 40 to sometimes 60 panels a week, depending on how long my episode is. These CMC files give me tons of strips that can pile up together. So this is my episode at a glance. I can't turn on all the panels because then it's big spoilers. But I've taken a couple panels that I can show that are very spoiler-free. And here's my little doodles of thumbnails. And then I can open up the files that I've saved. I've saved these files ahead of hand because sometimes they take a lot to process and save, and I want to spare you all because I know this workshop is only an hour. So I'll take, here's my lines. And just to get that gray off, I do like a select color gamut to take off the gray. Turns it into lines. I can layer it right over the flats. You can also, like, what I like a lot is that you can change the color, the like line color. You can also mess around with the flat colors, and so you can just like really work around it. I'm just going to get the file. I can paste it in and scale it to how I need into the panel. And it'll look like that. And then I can color edit how much I want to kind of suit the theme of it. And so after this, I'll move forward and show you guys kind of how I also implement models and start drawing my characters into the scene. But before that, we're gonna jump back. We'll jump back in and introduce you guys to our tips and tricks when it comes to the 3D models, when it comes to like the figures and stuff. And Jean, you can take it away.
Yep. You want to work smarter and not harder. So in Clip Studio Paint, they have 3D models and heads where you could customize so that you could match it to your characters. And you could easily drop poses directly onto your 3D models. And if you want, you could also save commonly used 3D body and hand poses into your material library as well. There's also a great feature called manga perspective, where it could exaggerate the perspective to make your poses more dynamic. And 3D models can be helpful for scenes where you have multiple characters, and if you need help with some like tricky perspectives. But it's important to never heavily rely on your 3D models in anime because it does get wonky. You still want to use your anatomy skills when you're drawing. Juuter can explain some of our other tips and tricks. So
yeah. So a lot of I can show you in clips soon, but a lot of these 3D models, the figures you can kind of customize and change the body shape. And I'd like to notice one of the biggest tips and tricks is what I've learned is working with vector lines, which Clip Studio, both Paint and EX version, offer these vector lines, where it allows you to draw basically like any other brush, keeps your texture and everything. But what it does is that when you scale up your panels, or you can scale down and you can mess with this line work without it ever affecting the quality, it still remains crisp, and you can always change the width to be however thin or however thick you want. And I can jump back into Clip here and kind of give you guys a better view. So, because my nomads all kind of have different bodies and proportions, I have over on the side here kind of all of my characters. So I can give an example. Satra's like 6 feet tall and he's very lanky. So I have a figure here of him, and you can really customize them. I can pull up the window. Oh, darn, it won't. Maybe because it's a separate window. In a separate window that does pop up on Clip Studio, which it won't screen share, you can kind of customize the body shape. I can probably show how it'll look though. You can make them fatter or like muscular. You can change their height. You can go all the way there. And so that's kind of how I got Satra. And then next to him is Lance. Whoops. Glitching up the wazoo. Hold on. Let's turn this off so it doesn't go crazy. There's Lance and Poco. And it'll help you kind of like when you're establishing scenes, if you need to get their heights right and so on. I love that. So I can show you fun ways. Let me just take this off. So in this one scene, I have sketched out that it's Lance and Poco that are sitting on the bench. And I can put these figures in right here. And it's really cool is that you can adjust these figures however you like. You can move their body. You can go very rigidly. If you double tap the model, it gives you all the joints that you can move kind of more naturally around and get the pose that you want. And there's also on the Clip Asset Store, you can save these you can download poses. So if I, per se, just needed like a quick running pose, I can go and type in the asset store like a running pose. Or so here I have them both sitting on like a bench, so I can drag and drop poses that I've saved ahead of time, and he's already sitting on the bench for me. And I don't have to really, in times for like Webtoon originals, you're trying to crunch out an episode a week, that a lot of times it's hard to just like sit there and think about the anatomy, and it lets me just like get through it quick, and then I can lower the opacity on these little benches, or lower the opacity on these little figures like so. And I can lower the opacity on the backgrounds too if needed. And then there I'll be able to line art just right over them without much of a problem. And so also with this one, I kind of need Poco's hand more down. So I can go over here and just drag the ball joints, which are really nice. And it'll help a lot. And also another like big time saver is, as I mentioned, the like vector lines. What I do is, because I draw so many of them just constantly, I save a lot of their heads, which I definitely recommend. Is if you are just reusing like common angles, like the full like face on, or like the side profile, classic 3/4 view, I can just go in, I can take one of the heads and paste it right in. And so this is entirely in vector. So when I shrink it down, I can just put it right over there to save me time. And you can see the line art's kind of gotten a little tiny, but with vectors, you can go over to the tool property over here, and you can choose to scale up the width however you like. I just kind of tap it, but you can also fix the width, and you can choose a line width. So say if I wanted it to be 10 pixels, I can just, or 11 pixels and give it a tap. That's really thick for the canvas that I'm working on, but I can also choose that, oh, I only want it 4 width, and it'll help line it up. Scale it down, you can touch up little areas, and then there I can go in, and a lot of times I can just freehand the clothes that are on them, just vaguely referencing like the sitting position. Again, like if you reference these models too hard, it might be like a little warped looking, and you still want it to match your style. But it is definitely a big help that I'm not sitting here drafting every single layer to make it look well. A big time saver for sure. And then I've also like have other assets like my main characters, not all the main characters, but some of the characters have masks and so on. So I just like save little sheets of like the mask designs or some common things. Like one of my character has a bow, and I'm not drawing that bow every single panel, or else I'll die. I'll mentally go insane. So I have his bow saved that I can easily copy and paste on. And they're all in vector layers. So however much I scale up with the scene or scale down the scene, the line weight won't be affected and the quality will remain the same. And yeah, that's kind of how I go into it. And let me jump back into our presentation so we can continue on with some more. Gian has made an awesome video that shares a lot of the Snaptoon capabilities. And that, guys, can really get into the scenes and stuff like that. It's amazing.
Hi, so I'll be showing you guys the 3D props workflow where you can convert 3D into line art. I usually find 3D model props in Clip Studio's assets, or you could find them on Acon 3D. You could purchase or find free assets. That's like up to you. And to turn 3D into liner, I'll be using the LT conversion. You could find that at the top under layer, convert to lines and tones, and the window should pop up and see how it looks like. You could adjust the settings, and you can make it nicer than this demo, but I'm going to hit OK for now. But you could do like things to make it more like cartoonish if your style is more stylized. But once you hit OK, it creates a liner layer and then also a fill layer. And what's neat about this fill layer is that you could change the colors and have instant flats, which saves time on flatting if you don't like flatting. But it's up to you on how you want to integrate, workflows. So I'll be showing you Snaptoon, where you could light your 3D background sets, and you could directly import your SketchUp files into Snaptoon if you use SketchUp. Or sometimes Snaptoon has a 3D background warehouse where you could find some like background sets, or if you want to just use Acon 3D, you could do that as well. So once you have it in, you could see that there's like 3 different lighting types, and you could just like play around with it. That's usually what I do. So you could make it fit your scene's mood, tone, or time of the day. And usually I just like mess around with it until I get what I like. And then the next tab is a style tab, which is where you could adjust the line art. So if you have like a very stylized like series, then you could like adjust the thickness of it, so you can make it really cartoony if you want. And it's just helpful to like, you know, make it fit and integrate into your series overall. You could also change the line art color, which is really helpful if you have like a really cool like color palette, but Reddit is kind of spooky, so not that. But there's a bunch of different adjustments you could do. And there's also a snow simulation. I know it's snow, right? Which you could control the power and speed of it. And I mean, I wouldn't do it indoors, but I mean, it's up to you. And then there's also a rain function where you could make it rain. It's helpful for outside sets. And again, you could change the power and speed of it. And then lastly, there's a bloom effect, which just makes it pretty and really webtoony, right? And then under cameras, you can add color filters to your scenes. And as mentioned, this is really helpful if you want to like adjust the mood or, you know, time of day. And then, you know, once you have what you like, you could just capture it. And then it takes a screenshot, and then you just import that image into your Webtoon. You could go ahead and adjust further from there as manually in like Clip Studio Paint or Photoshop, wherever you work. But that's just like the gist of it. There's like so much things you could just do, but wanted to keep it simple for this workshop. So that was some other 3D workflows you could utilize. As I mentioned, it's up to you what you want to do. You know, find the best workflow for your process.
There's actually one last thing that I forgot about that I really wanted to show you guys. It's very new to me too. I'm like really excited about this new asset that I got from Acon, which sometimes like hands and stuff can get crazy. Acon, I showed you Clip Studios models, which are like pretty smooth and simple. Acon's figure models can go like even more crazy. You can get ones with like muscles and stuff, which like if you're drawing like a beach scene or a shirtless scene or weightlifting and you need those like muscles, it'll help you kind of show how it's all made. And then let me open up the file, got my hands on these really cool hand models, and they work almost exactly like the figures. So here's just one of the file. The one that I received comes in like many files, and they're all these clips, and they're 3D models themselves. So I have this one scene where a character is reaching out their hand to grab another person's hand, and I really like 12. So I can go in and I can actually like take these hand models and place them straight into the Webtoon. And they, just like 3D models, you can move them around. You could orbit these hands. Let me get it at the right angle here. And then you can also like move the fingers around, and it changes like that. And then Clip Studio is actually updated even further. The one that I have on my laptop is the 1.0, but in 2.0, which I have on my iPad and my desktop, they allow for hand capture motion. So I could turn on my iPad camera, because I really like to work on my iPad for this line art phase. I can have my hand in front of the screen and it'll move along with this model and help pose the hands. And then you can also turn this into line art, and then bam, it's instantly just color it. Like you don't even need to draw these hands. This is all for, of course, like when you're doing these big quick crunches at Webtoon, and you know, You want to work smarter, not harder. It's not like an illustration every panel. You don't want to kill yourself over it. So I can throw in another hand that's being grabbed out. Let me rotate this like so. They're kind of running, so I want to angle the wrist down a little bit. And you can move the object. You can have tons of ways to edit this. And then, bam, I have a panel where someone's like reaching out, and it only took me a couple minutes, couple seconds. It's really a lifesaver, honestly, and I'm very excited to work with this further and learn more. All of my friends have had these hands for like a long time, and now I'm finally like have gotten it. I'm very excited to use it further. And then that is all that I want to show you guys on the clip, and we can move into this fun little slide that I have. So we have a cute little background while we move into our Q&A. As I was glancing over the chat, you guys were talking about, I did see a question that asked for like what canvas sizes I work in. So for my desktop, the longest strip that I can have is about 30,000 pixels. And I do that by 2,000 pixels. And then usually when my strips are very long, it's about 10, 30,000 pixel long strips. So question, what do you use? Where do you go if you need to have 3D models built specifically for your story? I'm not quite sure on that. That's actually something I'm looking into for your future projects where like there's a specific room or something that I need the setting in. But honestly, Acon 3D's site has like a lot of places. I just needed a hallway at one point, but it had to have like this very specific style. Oh, I had like a bar scene fight and I needed that. And so I just like, instead of sitting here drawing out all the tables and chairs, I might just like quick sneak on Acon 3D, see if they have anything that's fantasy or stuff like that. And then I was able to find it. Pretty quickly too, and it's just the Acon has like 6,000 plus models. You can almost find anything that you're looking for. I also see a question. This might be something for you to answer, Jean. Can you use Snaptoon with Blender files?
Yeah, I think you could you could open up like OBJ and FBX and SketchUp. They also have their own file format, but that's if you like purchase like Snaptoon assets. But the reason why they let like SketchUp files, they use a lot of SketchUp files is because they import like the textures and all that stuff. So if you don't add textures to your show up, unless you save it as a OBJ file, because that OBJ files save scene informations like textures, animation, etc.
Oh, here's a good question for what 3D modeling program would you recommend someone who is brand new to 3D? I started off with SketchUp. That is not something that I would recommend. That took a lot of trial and error. Luckily, my roommate was there to help baby me through the process. But from the looks of it, I want to say either Snaptoon or Abler, because they're both free programs that offer a lot of like the lighting aspects. Jean, could you confirm with like, is Snaptoon a pretty good starting program?
I would say it's beta program since it's still a beta program right now. Like if it's gonna like help your workflow, I would use it because it is kind of beginner friendly. But like if you are struggling with it, like your computer can't open up the program, then obviously I won't recommend it because there's still a lot of things that the coder is like adding in and stuff like that, or the creator of that program. Yeah. And I noticed some questions where people were talking about like different programs and stuff, and they're mentioning up Maya. I did use Maya in school, so I know what you guys are talking about. There is a student version if you do want to use Maya. It has a little bit more features than Blender, but most people recommend Blender because it is free, and a pretty good program for being free. But if anyone wants to get really into 3D, go ahead and try out Maya. If you have a student ID, you could do that. But for a Webtoon, I generally just try to use a simpler workflow because we're not trying to make like a movie, right? We're just trying to like assist our workflow. So if you find this too like intimidating, no worries, you could just start small. For most of my workflow, I just keep it like to like 3D props here and there, some 3D backgrounds, but the main point of 3D is just to help your workflow and make sure it integrates into your scene seamlessly, because you don't want it to, like, if you have a very stylized series and then you have like a realistic background, it will look a little bit wonky. And like Captain Juuter demonstrated in her workflow, she does a very great job of integrating her backgrounds into her series.
Mm-hmm. And I did see a comment mention that Snaptoon isn't available for Mac. It isn't, which is also, I'm an entirely Apple user, so I haven't been able to download Snaptoon. There is like a program that lets you kind of change your Mac to Windows if you really want to try it out. But Abler has just become available for Mac users. So I've like recently downloaded it and I'm still trying to like, get into it. It's hard to find time sometimes when you're crunching out a Webtoon weekly to learn new programs. So I've been sticking with SketchUp since I've gotten the hang of it for the most part. But I do want to, once I have time, really sit down and mess around with Abler, because it's pretty, from what I've seen, similar to how Snaptoon works, and it is available for both PC and Mac now for free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. It is, Snaptoon is also just for PC only, but yeah, I didn't know about Abler at all until Juuter mentioned it. And I was like, whoa, and it's like Mac friendly. So if you have an Apple product, go ahead and try it out.
Best for Apple users, I'd say starting out, you might want to tap into Abler. Blender, me and Jean are both kind of like new to Blender's territory, very on the surface, but I believe Blender is available for both PC and Mac as well.
Yeah, it's available. I am mostly a Maya user because 3D background days, but all the products are Mac and Windows friendly, but except for like Snaptoon. Yes, it's Abler. I just
I can pull back. Let me see if I can pull back up these slides.
To answer one person's question, yes, I have made my own 3D models because it was like robots, so that makes sense to. But for characters, you could just use like Clip Studio's customization. Like they have base models that you could customize to fit your character's physical features, and then just pose it and have it, ready that way. But I would say like even if you go that route, you should still, use your anatomy knowledge, because 3D does have a tendency to look a bit stiff. So in my case, making a 3D model character that was a robot was easier, to find like angles and perspective. But oh yes, Nomad Sculpt is for iPad, and it's also, I don't think it's free though. I had to pay for it.
I found it. Haha. Yeah, Abler. And if you go on Acon 3D, actually, Abler is available through that site for easy download. Would you say the line art extractor on Clip Studio, can I use that with the 3D apps you talked about? Line art extractor? That was Eugene, right? With the how you glasses and stuff?
I only recommend it for if you have like smaller props and stuff, because if you try doing that on like a 3D character, it does get really wonky and it would require a lot more adjustments. So I keep it more simple for like smaller props where I, like example, like a glasses, right? So I wouldn't recommend it on like organic objects like humans, animals. It does get it does get a little wonky.
Yeah, and thank you, Amanda, in the comments for giving some great information on Blender and Nomad. I see that readout. Blender is a great free program, but it's packed with features for animation, rigging, posing, beyond just downloading and using models for reference. If you're willing to brace the interface, Blender will have everything you need for 3D modeling.
Oh yeah, thank you for mentioning that too, Amanda. Nomad Sculpt. I also yes, it's a paid program, but it's pretty good if you want to like sculpt your own like 3D objects or characters. I think it's much more simpler than ZBrush, which is we don't have to get into it, but ZBrush is like another 3D sculpting program, but it's for Webtoon. I don't think I don't really recommend it. If you want to keep things like more like 3D beginner friendly, there's a bunch of other like entry level programs.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question for what programs do people use to easily create vector layers? I use Adobe Illustrator, which is not a big fan of. So the vector layers that I were talking about, which is a Clip Studio Paint exclusive kind of, it's not exactly how Adobe Illustrator works with their vectors, which is very much like shapes and things like that. I've never been a big fan. I've taken like classes in high school and I was just not happy. But when I learned that Clip, it's really just your line. Like when it's working with lines, it's amazing because it is just like you're drawing with a brush on any type of layer. And then it will just like hold it as though it's a vector. And technically you can click on those lines as objects and reshape them however you like. But it's just really easy to shape, erase, and everything like that. Whereas Illustrator works more with like design and the shapes. And thank you all for coming. There's so many like amazing comments. I'm sifting through everything now to like try to find all your questions that you asked that I've noticed earlier. Let's see, do you have some tips on how you can save time on lighting your scene once you have in the lines? I kind of sacrifice. It really depends on people's styles. So I do basic cell shading where I just paint bucket in like some little scenes. For more impact panels, I'll go way into more detail. But to save time, that is the one thing that I sacrifice. Although when it comes to like my magic effects, I love add glow. Add glow layer is amazing. I'll just come over with a nice airbrush and lightly add glow some stuff, and it just makes the scene like a whole lot more fancier. Do you have any tips on how to stylize art without being too Tracy with the 3D reference? That, for the most part, I've been is more time consuming on my end. I like when I pull up a lot of these 3D models, or with like the 3D, more so with like 3D bodies. What's really cool is I'll pull back up Clip Studio because I'm better at showing while telling. So, because the body types can get like a bit too, especially with like my toony style, it's not fully like anime, but with these body types, you can kind of really mess around with the shapes and get it to that figure. And then a lot of the times I will even just kind of, I can also go into more detail. So with these guys, let me show you. I saved some stuff. I didn't even, you can actually mess around with the perspectives that help warp it a lot more. So I can come in here, the manga perspectives can really help with like the hands growing bigger. And then you can mess with the camera a lot of the times. And it'll really help kind of warp it around. And again, like you don't want to do like a hard reference of these, but it'll give you a general figure. So this is like really fun. With the manga perspective, it can help you mess around with the hands and warp it even more. What about using 3D models to draw your characters? Like I depend on 3D models to draw my characters constantly. Without 3D models, I can't draw. Is that a bad thing that I depend on them? It's kind of a hard topic, I'd say. Like right now, for my job, I'm very dependable on them, but that is to save time. What I'd recommend is that maybe outside of that, also taking time to study anatomy in general. So like a figure drawing is an amazing way that you can really like just train yourself to visually look at the references instead of fully like tracing over them or relying on them. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing to rely on them when it comes to your comic, especially when you're trying to, like, in my case, work against time, or like in people who aren't crunching out, like, you have to draw these scenes repeatedly and constantly, the same characters a lot. It can get taxing, and sometimes it'll stop you from telling the story that you want if you're too burnt out. So like relying on these, I don't say is a negative thing, but if you want to not rely on it fully in your art outside of that, it would be good to like kind of challenge yourself and do a lot of like drawing from life and stuff like that to train those muscles as well. How would you use the 3D models in terms of backgrounds and still get it to be in your art style? Let's say my art style is cartoonish compared to the manhwa, especially in backgrounds. So like I kind of said, you can SketchUp wise, you can really extract just the lines and the flats and the different textures to help get it around. Oh, and I can, let me pull back up in the little bit of a crunch that we have left.
I'll just answer someone's question. So Juuter actually used vector to maintain consistency of the line art. If to answer that question. Sorry, I was answering your question about maintaining consistency with size of your line art. So
yeah, definitely the vectors, especially if I'm doing like a panel and then it's just a simple zoom up after that. I can totally just copy and paste what I've drawn in the previous panel and then expand the lines. And then if it looks a bit too thick after I expand it, I can just go into the object tool and instantly just like dim down that line weight. It's really great. And in here, like sometimes I'll have like really like over the top dramatic perspective, and you can in SketchUp kind of change around the point of view. So I can go to the field of view and I can really like get in there, make the buildings kind of tall. You can stretch it around all the perspective. Like say if I wanted a really cool upshot of the buildings, you can kind of warp it around. And even when I'm in, you can change these lines as well when you open up a clip, like how I, in my process at least, when I just extract the line art, I can turn this into vector and really like warp it around. You can actually change any line art layer that you already have. Like if you draw in brush, if you go to the options, like left click into that layer, it has a convert layer option and you can convert it into, you can switch between a raster layer or a vector layer. And this kind of helps with different styles. You can really like work around it. So I like to do all my color edits kind of like on my own so that it all blends in well with the scene. So I'll go in and like paint bucket and shade parts of it and all that jazz. When I extract lines, I usually make dark objects into one line. How can I stop that? So I'm not quite sure when, with how you're extracting the lines to get the dark objects. If you mean when you're turning the lines into vector, the one thing that vector doesn't work well with is the paint bucket tool. And sometimes if you are converting line or like special brush layers into vector layers, they can register those large spots as just one really thick line, which can get annoying. So that's why I always kind of start off in vector layers, just so I know I can control the line weight off from the get-go. I saw, is SketchUp better or is Abler better to work with different programs? It's really hard to say. Abler is still beta, so this file that I have pulled up right now in SketchUp, which is a large town, is not going to work as well in Abler because it's such a large file. So SketchUp definitely works better, and Snaptoon, I'd say, would also work better for the larger files that you're working with. But say like I only have a tiny tea room that I got to take a couple shots in, Abler will be able to run that smoothly. So it really depends what kind of 3D models you are working with.
I saw a comment about 3D being overcomplicated to use, and they wanted to know if there's any tips to make it faster. I would say, for any program that you start off with, it's going to take some time to learn, but eventually the more you use it, you will get faster for it. So like if you're totally new to 3D and you're trying to use it for the first time, it's going to take a long time. Like when I first used 3D, I would spend so much time just making like one thing. But now that I have like years of experience, it is more easier for me personally because I have that background. So if it's a method that fits my workflow. So but it's not mandatory. So if you don't find it sustainable and like you just don't want to like you just find it like really like time consuming for you, then that's fine. Like not every method's gonna work, and as I mentioned, you don't have to use 3D if you don't want to. This is just for like folks who are interested and want to utilize it more for their workflow, or folks who have some experience and want to see like how they could utilize their knowledge into the Webtoon workflow. So yep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see a question for how can I get different 3D heads to use for my characters. So Clip Studio Paint offers like simple head shapes as well as just heads shoulder up. But if you go into Acon 3D, they have a lot of more stylized heads that you can also kind of edit the features more, that give off a more anime or Webtoon-esque style, like those sharper noses and jaw lines and like the proper eye indents, like really detailed ones. They go hard over there sometimes. You just need to, you can mess around in like the search bars, but they'll offer a lot of 3D heads that you can browse around and find. And I believe Clip Studio Asset Store might also have some more detailed like shoulder up heads as well. Can you discuss more about coloring with 3D assets with your vector? If it mean like coloring in the vector lines, or when you vectorize your 3D lines, you can kind of, you'll have to have a layer underneath it, which is my biggest recommendation, so that all the lines are solid on their own layer, or set in their own layer, and then your coloring is all on a different layer. So it's better for editing and stuff like that. You can download a lot of different Paint Bucket tool assets where you just reference the line layer and you can fill in and easily color all the vector lines without needing to Paint Bucket on the vector layer itself, because that is very tricky to do.
I'm reading a comment about Clip Studio 3D models being laggy or slow. I've never had an issue with it being laggy. I'm not sure what's going on with like your settings. You said you have a good PC. Have you ever had any lagging issues, Captain Juuter?
I don't work much with the 3D like rooms and stuff when I put it into Clip, just because for me, I have an issue where my computer can't process such large files. I haven't actually tried it with the newest update, so they might have gotten better since because I was doing it with with Clip Studio like version 1 a couple downloads ago, so it wasn't like the most recent one either. And I think I downloaded like a hallway, and it was like a little laggy when I was moving around furniture and very finicky, so I just like often more than not just jump into SketchUp because I only do the figures. The figures work well for me. They don't lag as much, but bigger files will lag for me occasionally.
For a question about custom heads, there's like a bunch of set of heads, and you could just like pick one that's closest to your characters, and then they have like more settings where you could change like eye shape, nose shape, and like face shape. And so it's pretty straightforward once you see all the custom settings you could play around with. I find it a little bit more easier than the body customization. So yep.
And I so appreciate this walkthrough. Captain Juuter, Jean, this has been phenomenal to see your process with 3D. You are both obviously experts at integrating 3D models and assets and different kinds of software into your workflow. So as a quick question, do you have any advice that you would have given yourselves if you were just starting with 3D? What are some of like the main tips or encouraging advice you would have given yourself at your start of your journey?
Knowing the way that I learn, which is very hands-on, and if you're a very hands-on person, it's really good to just kind of jump in and take it a step at a time to learn the way. It is, as Jean said, it will take a little bit, but the more you do it, you will get used to. And I kind of learned, I'm still, as I said, new to this for the most part. I've only been with it a year now since I started season 2, but like I still learn new things, new tips and tricks and ways to teach myself. But it's just like a kind of, you know, keep at it and it'll get better. It's going to get easier. You'll get faster, and it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run for the product that I wanted to produce, which I'm not saying it's like the ultimatum to have. Like everybody has their own process, their own ideal of how they want things to look. But yeah.
Mistakes are not bad because it helps us learn, right? So if you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. It's a learning experience, and it's gonna help your 3D knowledge. And honestly, half the time I'm just testing things out. But one big tip is make sure like you integrate your 3Ds so that it matches your series style and aesthetic. So that's one thing that I would watch out for.
Awesome. Well, you both shared about 1 million epic tips that we can be using for our series productions. You know, all of us here today are truly grateful for your time in this workshop and for sharing your expert insights. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone in the audience. Big thank you to Captain Juuter and Jean today.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you, Jean, for helping out.
Thank you, and thank you for everything, and thank you for joining, everyone.